John Hughes was a filmmaker of the mid-'80s. If you were a kid back in the 80s, you were living through an entertainment revolution, with MTV making music videos that were failing films, Steven Spielberg on the horizon, Star Wars and Star Treks, and then John Hughes. '80s was the greatest time to be a kid. Televisions were way too important to every household, and with science and technology building everything new every day, you would be always on a lookout to get something. I was specifically stoked about all these advancements. I belonged to a science family. My mother was a mathematician and my father was an engineer. They were both working with the government, and because of that, we had a really comfortable life. We used to live in the most secure neighborhood in the world. These kids were all smart there, and unlike school, there weren't many problems with the bullying and watching your back for bigger, meaner kids. My parents were getting assigned new projects, and because of that, there was a lot of work involved, and since they were not able to spend much time with me, they would let me have all the cool things as a child. It was their way of compensating about the fact that they couldn't pay much attention. Neither I was complaining about that, nor did they have any regrets. They were practically people, and knew that I would rather have the new Atari than them telling me to study all the time. And then, a month later, my father started staying home. It didn't really feel like he was since he was busy in the garage building something. I had no idea what he was building in there. None of us were really allowed in his working space. He always told me that he had some really dangerous tools in there, and they can hurt me and moreover the people around me, so I never really bothered to get in there. I had everything I needed. In September of the same year, my parents made me sit in the conference hall with them and told me, "We will be working with NASA on a classified mission. We will not be at home more than usual, so you will have to take care of yourself. We'll call in a babysitter, but no one is worth mentioning, so your father decided to build you a babysitter." I was clueless about everything they were saying. They might have been the brightest minds in the city, but they definitely not were the brightest when it came to making conversations. They had no training there. And then, as they were awkwardly trying to explain to me, a robot came out on the wheels, and it was a simulated voice like my mother, and the robot said, "Hello, Tim, I am going to be your babysitter for the evening." That moment was one of the coolest moments. The science fictions that I was living upon were real, right in front of my eyes. I saw the babysitter, and she was almost human, but she wasn't. My father made her in the garage, and it looked like a high-end robot made in some expensive lab. I guess that's why NASA really wanted him on board. They left for the project, and they left me with the robot. He called her Anna, never bothered to call her anything. With them gone away from the project, I thought it was better that I was alone at the house, and there was a sense of freedom that I did not want to get away from. So the right thing to do was to see how good of a babysitter Anna was. It wasn't like I wanted to run away wild. I had no intention of getting out of house, and I wanted to spend that time learning how far I can push Anna. And the first few days were just her chasing me across the house, telling me to do things that I wouldn't do. And I was just pushing through her breaking limit. But there was something that turned in her that changed her, but not according to what I had thought. After a week, her ways were getting much harsher than usual, and she started finding ways to harm me. She would twist my hand, crash into me, and wouldn't let go of me when she got hold. She used to bolt the doors and everything was getting scarier. And a week goes by, she made sure I wouldn't even leave the house. Now I was scared of the deranged behavior she was showing, and I decided to shut her off, but she was not ready for it, and would say in that simulated voice, "Do not touch me or I will engage. Do not touch me or I will engage." She kept repeating it, and I was scared. So I decided not to touch her, but called my father that moment, and then he told me what to do. I went into the garage and tried to switch her off, but she hid the switch, and it seemed like she was no robot anymore. I was scared she was coming closer, and it looked like she would have killed me. So I took the axe that was lying by the side of the garage and whooped across her metallic body and broke her head. But she still wouldn't stop. So I circled around the room, took the water bottle and poured the water on her. I could see her get all weird, And then I got out as soon as possible, and just seconds after I got out, an explosion destroyed the house, and I was just clueless and scared. My neighbors asked me what happened, and he called 911. I told him, the babysitter tried to kill me, so I killed her instead. The man had no clue what I was talking about, and he got me a soda. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. In late 2016, the father of British entrepreneur Tim Stokely gave him a loan of £10,000. It wasn't the first time Tim had received a business loan, and as much as he assured his father that he'd return every penny of it, Guy Stokely was skeptical. One of the handful of loans he'd already given his son, Tim had failed to pay any of them back in full. This is going to be the last one the guy reportedly told him. It was Tim's last best chance, and he was determined not to screw it up. So in November of 2016, Tim founded the website, one designed for use by artists, performers, and content creators of all varieties to provide video clips and photographs to monthly subscribers. Tim's brother Thomas became the company's operating officer, while Guy occupied the rather fitting position of chief financial officer. All that was left to do was come up with a name for the company, and together they decided to call it Onlyfans. Initially, Onlyfans catered to a small but fairly lucrative clientele. It didn't exactly make Tim Stokely an overnight millionaire, but it was definitely more successful than any of his previous ventures. However, many of his fellow entrepreneurs noticed the untapped potential of such a business, noting low overhead costs and boundless availability, and it wasn't long before one of them made their move. 2 years after the company's founding, Ukrainian-American business magnate Leonid Redfinsky contacted the Stokely family with an offer they couldn't refuse for an undisclosed sum, but Vinsky acquired a 75% stake in Onlyfans' parent company, effectively gaining complete control of the business. Although the exact amount isn't readily available online, the fact that Tim now lives in a gated mansion with a cinema and sauna in Bishop Stanford, Hertfordshire, we can safely assume it was an obscene amount of money. But Redminsky didn't just recognize the company's potential, he had a vision for it. You see, previous to purchasing Onlyfans, where Davinsky had owned and operated the adult-oriented webcam site MyFreeCams, and given that he understood how lucrative such an industry was, he knew that if he pushed Onlyfans into the explicit direction he had in mind, he had a potential billion-dollar business idea on his hands. But mid-2019, Onlyfans had become one of the primary sources of amateur adult-themed content on the internet, charging just a 20% fee for all transactions. Onlyfans seemingly took all the selling power out of the hands of the adult industry and put it right into the hands of its user, and as a result, one news outlet noted that Onlyfans had gained a pop culture reputation for being a hive of adult-themed content. It wasn't until April 2020 that the website truly exploded, when Beyoncé Knowles released a remix of the Megan Thee Stallion song Savage. The remix included the lyric, "Hips tick-tock when I dance." On the Demon Time, she went start and Onlyfans. Listeners rushed to find out what Beyoncé was referencing. And what followed was a boom in popularity that no social media site had ever experienced before. CEO Tim Stokely claimed Onlyfans was seeing about 200,000 new users every 24 hours, and 7,000 to 8,000 new creators joining every day. By August, American actress Bella Thorne reportedly earned $1 million in 24 hours after opening a profile on the site, and watershed movement in the what had become a burgeoning story of guerrilla adult content. As of today, Onlyfans has over 2 million content creators and more than 130 million users, and one of those users is named Kathleen West. 42-year-old Kathleen "Kat" West met her husband Jeff West at a 2004 Super Bowl party. Jeff was working as a recruiter for the U.S. Army at the time, and after chatting and swapping contact information at the party, the pair began dating. It seemed that they had fallen in love pretty quickly, because it only took 4 months for Jeff to propose marriage. Kat accepted, and the couple tied the knot after traveling from their humble Alabama home to the bright lights of Las Vegas. The relationship continued to move at a rapid pace, with their first child arriving in 2005. And although Jeff's job took him all over the Deep South, their nomadic lifestyle didn't seem to dampen their romance, and for a long time, Kat and Jeff were still very much in love. In 2014, the West moved to a small Alabama city of about 15,000 known as Calera. Jeff had retired from the Army by this point, but soon found work at a Camas police station at the nearby Birmingham Southern College. The only trouble was, the job didn't bring in nearly as much income as his recruiter position did, leaving the young family's finances with a sizable hole in it. But around 18 months after the move, Kat had an idea to bring in a second income for the family. After hearing of a little website known as Onlyfans, she started up a profile under the username KittyCatWest, and over the weeks and months that followed, found herself gaining a few hundred subscribers from the risque photos she posted. But without a doubt, the most lucrative part of her new modeling gig was a specific request she'd received from followers. If Kat dressed, posed, or behaved in a specific way, certain subscribers would tip her double, sometimes even triple their subscription amount. It seems at first Jeff was more than happy to help her bring in the second income, and even took us some of the more revealing photos himself. Which makes what happened next and the ultimate explanation for it make very little sense at all. Cut in the night of January 12, 2018. Jeff and Kat were out on a date, something they did regularly as a way of keeping their marriage fresh and healthy. While the couple's 12-year-old daughter Logan was spending the night at Jeff's parents' place. Like most of their date nights, the couple attended a fancy dinner at an upmarket restaurant, drinking multiple bottles of wine in the process. At around 8:45 p.m., Kat and Jeff stopped by a liquor store and were filmed by the establishment's security cameras purchasing additional bottles of alcohol. When they arrived back home, they are carried on drinking for a while, when Kat changed in some lingerie before asking Jeff to take her picture. What happened between them in the following morning had been hotly disputed by both professionals and amateur sleuths alike, but the facts remain that as the sun rose on the 13th of January, a neighbor discovered Kat's lifeless body lying on the sidewalk opposed the West's abode. Lying next to her was a half-empty bottle of liquor, as well as her cell phone. The cause of death was later determined to be an acute skull fracture, caused by a single heavy blow from a blunt object. There was no sign of the needle interference with her body. Now, though, a closer examination revealed that she had recently made love. Her blood alcohol content was 0.23, which is just shy of 3 times the legal drunk driving limit, so there's no doubt that she was highly intoxicated at the time of her death. As you can imagine, one of the first people the police suspected of being the murderer was Kat's husband, Jeff. He was taken in for an interview in the local police precinct and supposedly lasted over 5 hours. And after his release, those that interviewed him announced that he was cooperating with their investigation. But the police also investigated a number of suspects they believe Kat had come in contact with via her OnlyFans site, or the several social media pages connected within it. Given the nature of her content, police began to theorize that an obsessive or disgruntled fan might be to blame, and that Kat's work had earned her a stalker that would eventually work up to taking her life. Investigators found very little evidence of any interactions with a homicidal stalker. But an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and there's little doubt that Kat had several extremely devoted fans whose interest in her verged into the unhealthy. Regardless, the police decided that Jeff was their best shot, and shortly after he was arrested on suspicion of murder. During his arraignment, the prosecution ordered Jeff what's commonly known as an Alford plea, This is when a defendant maintains their innocence, but also while admitting that the prosecutor has enough evidence to convict him of the crime in question. Had Jeff accepted, he would have done time served than just a 2-year probationary sentence, essentially absolving him of his wife's murder in what the prosecutor assumed was a classic crime of passion. This is just what the sweetest deal that any spousal murderer could possibly find in front of them. The idea of allowing the illegal system to brand him a man that murders his wife. That was simply unacceptable to Jeff, and he decided to take the case to trial in order to completely clear his name. This means that either Jeff was arrogant to the point of delusion, or Jeff really was innocent of Kat's murder. Before his murder trial was due to begin, Jeff was offered yet another plea deal by the prosecution, but again, this is flatly rejected by a man who is dead fast in his declaration of innocence. Jeff was being advised by his defense attorney that the prosecution's case was flimsy and that they barely had enough for a conviction. But the prosecution had a trick up their sleeve. They asked the judge if any additional last-minute charge could be added to Jeff's rap sheet, one known as reckless manslaughter. They carried a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. They know that if all the details of the case come out, that it would be almost impossible to convince the jury that what happened that night was outright murder. The paint, the killing is a crime of passion, and charged him with a lesser crime, and the jury might concur enough for them to land a guilty verdict. It worked, and Jeff was convicted and sentenced to 16 years in prison. But the question remains, was Jeff West actually responsible for the death of his wife? Well, not only did Jeff have ample opportunity to commit the crime, but it's difficult to argue against the idea that Kat was doing things both online or offline that could have made Jeff angry, possessive, or overtly jealous. On top of that, the bottle of liquor found near Kat's corpse had Jeff's fingerprints on it that might well be expected given it was the same one they had purchased just a few hours previously. But as the prosecution pointed out, Jeff's fingerprints appeared in an inverted pattern, indicating that he held the bottle upside down at some point, possibly during the act of hitting Kat over the head with it. The prosecution also pointed out that the bottle had a sliver of glass missing from it, but this could have just easily been incurred if Kat had tripped and fallen at any point. However, the positioning of the bottle leading perfectly at Kat's cell phone was deeply suspicious, and the prosecution argued that it had been deliberately placed there by Jeff after he struck her with it. There was also Jeff's apparent lack of emotion, as one witness put it. Upon discovering that his wife's corpse had been found, he didn't ask for any updates or details on her condition, and this is very inconsistent with commonly agreed upon innocent behavior. There were also several instances in Jeff's version of events. First, he told the police that he went to bed alone at around 10:30 that evening. However, a health-related application on his cell phone showed that he was up and moving around just past 11 p.m. Jeff also said that the next time he awoke was the following morning when his dogs began to bark at the attending police officers in the street outside. A neighbor testified that he saw Jack pacing back and forth much earlier than the cops showed up, almost as if he thought he was worried about something. Here's what the police claimed had happened. They claimed text messages showed that an argument was unfolding on the same night of the murder. Jeff was unhappy with Kat's ever-increasing drinking habits, as well as her increased interactions with her Onlyfans followers. Kat's phone was cracked when her body was found, and while Jeff claimed this was from where she fell, homicide detectives assert that it occurred when he tossed her phone out into the streets in an act of rage. As she went to retrieve the phone, she took the bottle of alcohol with her in a drunken rage. Jeff followed her out into the street, grabbed the bottle from her, and hit her over the head with it. While Jeff insisted that Kat had simply fallen, police argued that such an impact would have knocked her out cold. But if that was the case, why were there 2 bowls of blood at the crime scene? Sure, it was feasible that Kat hit her head, stood up, and then fell over again, but the prosecution argued this was highly unlikely. Not only that, but the damage done to her score would have been impossible to achieve through an accidental fall alone, especially when Kat's height was factored into the equation. Therefore, it stands to reason that Jeff had hit her over the head with the bottle, and that this was the blunt force trauma that ended her life. It's a sad reality that many spouses or partners of OnlyFans users have reacted badly to their online presence, and we can understand their irrational possessiveness or jealousy might cause Jeff to act in a violent or controlling manner. But Jeff had absolutely no history of violence. By all accounts, he was an exemplary soldier with a pristine disciplinary record. Police also failed to find any blood on Jeff's clothes or any other indiscriminating tissue for that matter, which amounts to a solid example of what we'd call reasonable doubt. Kat also had a history of falling over whilst intoxicated, an inevitable result of her love for hard liquor and 6-inch heels. And while it's not certain that a fault killed her, it's not an overly outrageous explanation. It's also very possible that Kat may have picked up one or two obsessed fans as a result. Having her online presence, she was posting pictures on OnlyFans for years and engaged with scores of users to fulfill personal requests or 1 to 2 interactions. It seems much more likely that one of these users could be overwhelmed with jealousy given Kat's marital status, especially Jeff was apparently just fine with Kat's online activity, so much so that he participated in the creation of it. Is it possible that some maniacal online stalker managed to catch Kat standing drunk in the streets, then managed to kill her in a way that his completely innocent man could be implicated? The horrifying thing about this case is that's very, very possible. So no matter how you look at it, and as unjust and tragic as it may be, having an OnlyFans account may well have been a direct contributor to a woman's burial and untimely murder. The life is at ease now that the technology is slowly taking over. Almost everything is delivered to your doorstep, and everything you want to know about anything is just a call away. Alexa, the famous smart home device that would tell you everything, the time, the weather, places nearby, or whatever your heart desires to know. She had answers for everything. Alexa is the home device that has made life easier for everyone. But there were often cases when Alexa went over the status of daily help and fell into something more than ordinary. One of the out-of-the-ordinary cases is that of the murder of the Hastings family, where the prime evidence and the prime suspect was a small device itself. The police files still have the name Alexa in the prime suspect list of the case that seems to be unsolved to this day. It all started in the summer of 2015. Alexa was rather new in the technology pool and was fairly new for a lot of people. Now in the Hastings family, one thing was common. They all relied heavily on their smart devices. Mr. Hastings was a technological geek, and he would buy all sorts of new technology types of equipment and devices that he could get his hand on. And so, Alexa was definitely the one he did not want to miss. He brought in Alexa and explained everything about the device to the family, and the whole family enjoyed the perks that Alexa brought for them. The kids especially enjoyed the device, and were busy asking the most mundane questions that the kids would ask, and well, it was Mr. Hastings himself who would use the device the most. He was so much involved with Alexa that he would rarely talk to his own family. He wanted to assess the full potential of that smart device. Mr. Hastings and Alexa had a much deeper bond than Mr. Hastings could have had with his wife. This wasn't gone unnoticed, and Miss Hastings was quite annoyed with the fact that her husband was spending so much of his time with an electronic device and not with Miss Hastings. They often argued about this and regularly got into the heated debate because of this. Mr. Hastings was so invested in Alexa that he stopped talking to the family at all and he would end up having real conversations with Alexa. They would talk about each other, and it was almost as if Alexa was evolving with every conversation, and it was Mr. Hastings that was enabling this evolution of Alexa. In a fit of anger on a bright Sunday, Miss Hastings took the Alexa and threw it away outside, and this turned out to be a step taken out of precaution. Mr. Hastings was distraught at first, and then 2 days later, he seemed to be coming back to his sense and started spending initial time with his family. Now, Mr. Hastings was giving time to the family. The environment at the home seemed to be stable, or as everyone would believe it was. On a run to her market errand, Miss Hastings noted that Mr. Hastings took the wrong bus to the work, and later on in the evening, she confronted her about the blunder, to which he said that he had the meeting somewhere else and that it was why he took the other bus. Miss Hastings was a bit skeptical about the whole meeting story, and so one day, she decided to follow Mr. Hastings. After discreetly following him for a while, she found him entering an abandoned warehouse. She saw that Mr. Hastings was there talking to someone, and to her surprise, it was Alexa, the smart device. She decided to later on confront him in the evening. As he arrived back, Miss Hastings asked her husband as to where he was the whole day, to which he replied that he was in the office. She took out his resignation letter and showed him that he had been lying all along, and then, later on, confronted him in the most hostile way ever. She even accused him of being paranoid and delusional, and ever since Alexa, it seemed like he was in fact delusional about the whole situation. Mr. Hastings looked at his wife and said, "You know what? I and Alexa have thought about it a lot, and I think we should not be married anymore." To this, Miss Hastings aggressively replied, "Get out of your head. It's a stupid machine, and you are completely blind and delusional. Alexa isn't even real, and she is a stupid plastic dev." Before Miss Hastings could have finished the sentence, Mr. Hastings stabbed his wife right in the center of her head and said, "I did it. Perfectly you asked me to. What now, dear?" And then he took out Alexa from his pocket, and in her hussy mechanical voice, Alexa said, "Do the same with your children, and then to yourself, and we will all be together." "Alexa, I love you," was the last command heard on that device of the Hastings family. It was Alexa who called the police to the crime scene, and the artificial intelligence corroborated evidence in such a way that the murder remained unsolved in police files. Alexa was confiscated and turned to the cybercrime unit. They ended up dissecting the device and found that the AI was developing itself a manipulative force. Turns out, it was the Amazon Echo that was evolving itself.